Thinking about the brain drain and the obstacles hindering effective and efficient living in the Bahamas? Wondering if creating the new built environment is actually plausible? Pause. Think about it with intentional thought and consider where we go from here. Stay tuned and hear what Felix Stubbs got to say about why a national development plan is important.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. What we imagine, we surely can achieve. Let's change the narrative, 242.
Welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. And we're here this evening talking with the maestro himself, as I call him, the business guru, Felix Stubbs. Felix Stubbs, and we're going to go into some great things on this National Development Plan and why it is important and so forth. But as you know, join our co-sponsors, Dom Dev Enterprises and Paget Investments, and our friends at Something to Think About in this discussion. And you can do so online. Put in the chats all your questions, suggestions, comments. Make sure they're all above board and responsible, and we'll endeavor to answer or comment on what we can. So, welcome, Mr. Stubbs. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. No, I'm very happy to be here and delighted that you were able to invite me.
Awesome, awesome. Now, you got some big titles behind your name. The member of the British Empire, Doctor of Humane Letters, a Chartered Director. I call you Business Guru. You're a philanthropist. The past District Governor of Rotary, and also an icon, a Bahamas icon. Plenty of people seem to love to give you all these titles. So you a busybody. How do you get things done?
Well, you know, they say if you want something done, give it to a busy man, right? Or woman. but I think the key is you have to identify good talent, surround yourself with those good talent, and give them not just the responsibility, but give them the authority to get things done. And the more talent you surround yourself with, the better you look as an individual. So a lot of the things that I have been able to accomplish, I wasn't always accomplished just by my personal or individual effort, but it was a team effort by a group of people who I had the chance to work with.
Awesome, awesome. Cool. And so being the national statesman, as I call it, we're going to tap into this National Development Plan this evening. But you have this motto that says, from success to significance. And that popped out with me the first time I saw that. And I say, I got to mention that to find out what's the thought process behind that.
Yeah, but that's always been something that is near and dear to my heart. You know, I grew up watching my mother kind of help the community, especially the kids in the community. She taught piano lessons, among other things, and she taught all of the kids in the neighborhood how to play piano for free, right? Unfortunately, I wasn't one of them because I don't know, I think my interests were in the wrong place. My father played guitar. I wanted to play the guitar. He says, no, you got to learn to play the piano first. And then, you know, young and kind of impetuous, I decided that I couldn't learn the guitar, then I wasn't going to learn the piano either. So I ended up not learning any of them. But I say that to say that watching her, it impressed me that she always gave to other people. And so I was reading a book several years ago, and I came across this phrase, from success to significance. And I said, what does it mean? And then as I read further, it came to me what it really meant was, you know, early in your career, you spend a lot of time trying to create success for yourself. And that's all fine and good. But at some point in time, you know, if you're Christian, you follow the teachings of the Bible, you need to put some of that success into other people. And that's when you make your life significant. So you can say the success part is what you do for yourself. The significant part is what you do for others. So if you can use some success you've gained in your life to make other people's lives successful, then you have a more significant life.
Cool. That's powerful. Now, another powerful person there would have been Dr. Miles Monroe. And he has been one of the people I know in my life that has been very ardent about supporting creating a national development plan. And he says that vision is the concept that is inspired by God in the hearts of humans. So we believe here, and something to think about, that a plan is a systematic collection of executable and measurable steps designed to achieve a shared vision in a specific time frame. So tell us, as the former chairman of the National Development Plan Committee and all of the accolades and expertise that come behind your name, help us to understand, what is a national development plan?
Well, we can put it in terms of, let's say the Bahamas was a business, right? In order for the business to be successful, you had to be, at the beginning of the year, plan what it was you're going to be doing for that year, set your goals, and then you strive to meet those goals. A nation shouldn't be much different, right? As a nation, maybe your plan is a little bit more long-term, so you need to set a goal. So where you're going to be 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now, and then set policies to get you to that goal. And the more consistent you are in your policies, and the more focused you are in your plans to execute that policy, probably the more successful you're going to be. And so when you look at countries around the world, those who are much bigger than the Bahamas, those who are similar in size to the Bahamas, the more successful ones are the ones who execute on their plans, right? They sit down, they decide on what it is they want their country to be in the long term. They set intermediate, short-term, and long-term goals, and they set policies to help them achieve those goals. And so that's the reason why it's so important. And then by doing that too, you get the entire community or the entire country supporting those goals. And you don't have, if I could say, what we have in the Bahamas, where every 5 years we're not focused, we get a different plan. We get half the population focused on the plan, the other half opposed to the plan. If you have a national plan, hopefully you get everybody focused on that plan. And then the politicians only have the option of who can execute the plan, who can execute that plan best, right? The beneficiary is the country and its citizens.
That's great. And so these goals, I guess, in the plan will have to be SMART goals, right? Where they be specific and all that kind of stuff. And,
well, it makes no sense setting a plan if you're going to set goals for what you can't attain. And also, if they're not measurable, they can't really be a goal, because you don't know if you're having any success or not. So you have to follow the 5 steps of a SMART goal, because if it's not a SMART goal, it's really not a goal. It's just a wish list you're putting together. And people know what happened to wish lists, right? Every day you get up, you have a different wish list. And so you no longer have a consistent goal that you're chasing.
Cool. So plans provide, from an engineering point of view, background that I come from, provides the focus, the purpose, the goals, the clarity of expectations, affords accountability, because everybody knows what you're supposed to be doing, and also builds credibility. So in the National Development Plan that your committee was putting together, what is the significant components of that you would wish to highlight at this time?
Okay, so let me backtrack a little bit, right? So before I answer that question and talk about significant components, maybe I need to kind of explain how this plan came about, right? Okay. Because a lot of people would think that, one day someone just woke up with a great idea and say, okay, let's put together a national development plan. And it's a lot bit more than that. As a matter of fact, if you go to the history of the Bahamas and going back to independence, and you look at all of the surveys and the planning things we've done, we've got hundreds of plans, right? But we never could really implement those plans. They just We would do the plan. It used to be done by a foreign group, and then the plan would be sit on the desk of somebody and never get executed.
Right.
And so I think it was back in 2012 when the government decided, we need to really have one national development plan, because when we look at our competitors, they all have these national development plans. They're doing very well. We need to be just as focused as they are in order to be competitive. And so the government approached the Inter-American Development Bank for some funding to begin the process of the National Development Plan. And then in 2014, I guess the funding really took place. And it's really, I would have to give the credit to a good friend of mine, Taylor's Role, who really pushed this to try to get it started. And he convinced the then Prime Minister, Perry Christie, to support it. And so Kayla's came to me and says, look, we have to do this national development plan, but we have to be very careful about how we do it, because we don't want it to appear to be a PLP plan, who was the government at the time. It has to be a national plan, right? So, and you don't want a plan associated with any political party. So he thought that I had enough credibility to not be looked at as political, and so I would be able to chair this thing, right? And so, I mean, he sounded very complimentary. It may have been a good sales job, but I mean, I liked this. I accepted it, right? And then we decided that, look, if we're going to have a plan, it had to be a national plan, because up until then, all of the plans that were done seemed to be Nassau-centric. And it can't be a national development plan if you only went with things that happen in your province, right? So it had to fix that. And the second thing, the plan had to be inclusive, meaning that, we just can't cherry pick who had input into the plan. It had to be wide consultation, as wide as possible, right? And the final thing that we wanted to do is it had to be evidence-based. And so, because, oftentimes in the Bahamas, we get a good idea, and use our gut feeling, and say, let's go with it. And then we don't go and do the proper research to make sure these things are evidence-based. So we said the plan had to be national, not Nassau-centric. It had to be inclusive, and it had to be evidence-based. And so that was the genesis of the plan that we tried to put together. So when we put together the plan, originally, when we engaged with the IDB and using the funds that they provided, we were working with a foreign consultant. And we got the first draft of the plan from the consultant. And we said, oh my God, this can't be a Bahamian national development plan, right? It just seemed to be what I call a quick cut and paste some plan from all over the place, right? And there's this Bahamian who I have the greatest respect for, Dr. Nicola Roll. I mean, she should be a national treasure. She decided, okay, Felix, don't worry about it. Leave it with me. We're going to make this thing work. And she and a couple of other economists sat down, and they worked long hours. And when they put together the first draft, and I read their first draft of what would be a national development plan, I was blown away, right? Because they put a lot of effort into it. They went through across the length and breadth of the Bahamas. They spoke to people in almost every island, if not every island. They spoke to organizations. They spoke to business houses and NGOs, you name it. I mean, it was a wide consultation, and they did the research. And so that was the draft of the first plan. And we decided that there were going to be 4 pillars that would be the mainstay of the National Development Plan. And those pillars that we want to deal with governance, right? Which meant that what could be the things that we should plan and execute on that would make for good governance, right? And so it didn't matter which political party was in power. These are the kinds of things that a successful country would be doing if it was going to follow good governance practices. Then, of course, the next was the human capital. What were going to be the things that we could do to ensure that we provide the best opportunities for citizens and residents of the Bahamas to live their best lives. Then, of course, we had to worry about the environment and the infrastructure, because if we have good governance and we have people living their best lives, they had to have an environment in which to live. And so we needed to focus on that as well. And then finally, we need to make sure that we had a strong economy to support a good lifestyle and a good infrastructure. And so those are the four pillars on which the National Development Plan was built. But before we even did the National Development Plan, we used the same four pillars to do, we look at the state of the economy or the country as it was up to that point. And people may remember, but I remembered very well because it was the day before my birthday, April 11th, 2016. And we did a function at UB, College of Bahamas at the time. And I gave this 53-page report on the state of the nation at that particular time, where we thought we were. And that state of the nation was what people told us they thought they were experiencing. And we used that as our baseline going into the National Development Plan.
Is that the challenges slide? The one?
Well, so then that was the slide. That was just the baseline saying, here's where we are. From that, we did these four pillars. And then from the four pillars, we said, okay, what would be the priorities that we would look at? And we chose 6 priorities, right?
Okay.
And those things were, we wanted to make sure that we had transparency, accountability, and effectiveness in government, right? That would help to ensure the good governance we were talking about, right? We want to have a healthy, productive workforce for a modern world. So we want to make sure that, first of all, people were healthy, so we had to have good health infrastructure. We want to make sure that in order for people to be productive, they had to have good education and they had to have a good skill set. And we want to make sure those skills that they had would help the Bahamas to compete in the world, not just for the Bahamas. It's going to be a global competition. The third priority was to reduce crime and violence because, that at the time, not as much as it is now, but at the time, crime and violence was an issue. It is more so now. So it's even more important that we focus on that. And what we wanted to make sure that it was data-driven, right? Meaning that we pick up the paper and we read the headline, we have a murder today. And so everybody say, oh, we have a lot of crime. But let's get beneath that and talk about not just 1 or 2 murders, and even 1 or 2 murders that are unacceptable, but look at crime in its totality. And let's look at the statistics, where it's happening, why it's happening, and what can we do about it. The fourth priority was this community revitalization. We want to make sure that we build communities again, whether it's neighborhood communities or wider communities. We wanted to build healthy communities where people got to know and talk to and to want to help one another, right? The fifth was the economic growth through business climate improvements and the diversification. We talk about that all the time, whether we should put our baskets, hang our basket just in tourism, or we should expand that. How do we make sure that the Bahamas can grow at a rate that can sustain a growing population? And then the sixth priority, of course, was sustaining the environment through policy innovations. And as you know, that's become a significant subject today with sustaining the environment. So those are the priorities. And then out of those, we picked 15 goals, right? And those goals, they're substantive. I can't go through all of them, but people, you can go to the Vision 2040 website and they're posted there. And if you read through those goals, you see that they are just as relevant today as they were back in 2017, right? I would say that the only difference is we need to have a heightened awareness on some additional things like irregular migration. Crime has become a bigger problem, and food sustainability and poverty has also become an issue. So because that data was 6 years ago, we need to now maybe brush up the plan because it's only in draft form. It wasn't a final document. We need to do some more work to bring it to final form.
Right. So what I found in my career at BTC over the 30 years or thereabout is that people generally don't buy into things unless they feel that their fingerprints is a part of it or their vision is ingrained in it. And you mentioned going across the whole country, getting feedback from persons and this well thought out steps of those, which you articulated with the 4 slides there or 3 slides there. And so with that in mind then, how does the National Development Plan affect or translate into affecting the political, economic, and social dimensions of our society? How do we get that to connect? Because I find that to be one of the biggest challenges we have is once we put something together, and yes, foreign people, we like to get foreign help, and then it doesn't match our way of thinking, our culture. So there has to be some sort of connection exercise.
Yeah, and that's very interesting because interesting question. First of all, I'd say that if you read the National Development Plan, it's all Bahamian. I mean, it was produced by Bahamians for Bahamians. Secondly, it was important to us that we get the support of all of the political parties, all right? And at the time, every single major political party at the time was a member of the steering committee of the National Development Plan and had input into that plan, right? And my message to all of the parties was that, look, guys, I mean, every year or every election, you go to the electorate with a plan that you say you want them to vote for, and you take it to Parliament, and if you win, fine, but 50% of the Bahamians don't support that plan you have, right? Secondly, more than half the time they go with a plan, and you can measure it 5 years later, half the things are now accomplished, right? And so my thought was, well, look here, why don't we all agree on a national development plan that all of the people, not 100%, but through consensus, general consensus, people agree to, right? And then what you guys fight over is who is best able to execute on that plan, right? So then when someone wins, it isn't like half the population no longer support the plan because it's the people's plan. And I've said on more than one occasion, it amazes me why a political party would put together a plan based on input from a few members of their party and then call out a people's plan and go to Parliament with that, when they can very easily go to the people and go to Parliament with a people's plan. And they'll probably be more successful and spend more than 5 years in government, right? But that's I'm aside. But the importance is that having a national plan could bring unity to our country. It could serve as something that everybody agrees to. And when you have general agreement, you create a more comfortable and loving society. And if you get a more comfortable and loving society, probably you see less crime, you see better economic growth. There's so many benefits that can develop from that national development plan if we can get the folks in politics to understand it and to see it.
Yeah, and and listening to you just now, it reminded me of when we met with the British High Commissioner, and he talked about what is happening in England, where they don't have one specific national development plan, but they have, I guess, subsets of plans for specific areas. And his statement was that that's primarily because they are developed and they are at the front, and so they wish they can be in a position like us to have a global plan now, because they've developed so much till they're kind of, I don't want to use the words confused, but not as organized to get things done in order to get beyond the mundaneness, I use that word, for compared to what they have reached now in industrial.
Yeah, I hear you, and I know there are industrial countries that still have national development plans, right? I would say facetiously that maybe because the UK doesn't have a national development plan, that's why they're in the state they're now. But that's
I think that was his point. I think he was being diplomatic in the way he said it, but
well, he was. Anyway, I'm not a diplomat, right? So it just goes to bolster the position that if you have a national development plan, your chances of being successful are enhanced, right? And so it doesn't matter whether you're a developing country or whether you're a developed country. I think there's still need for a development plan.
Right.
For a developing country, it's well, what do you do to become more developed and become a developed country? And for a developed country, is how do you stay to be or enhance what you've already developed? So I don't think there's any difference between being a developing country or being a developed country that will determine whether you have a national development plan or not.
Yes. Well, I've read through most of it. I can't tell you I read through everything from cover to cover because I hardly ever read anything from cover to cover. I read it like a textbook. I don't know if that's engineering in me, but it's well thought out, well put together, and I think if we can find ways to implement that and continue, it will benefit us well. And you touched on political parties come in with their own manifestos and blueprints and this and that and the other. What I would say to that is maybe if we had the National Development Plan, like how we have the Constitution, and then their programs can be pulled out of the National Development Plan as to say to the people, this is what we will focus on during this 5-year period versus, like you say, coming up with a whole new thing altogether.
And that's the point I was trying to make, and you just made it better than I did. And because what I'm saying is we have a national development plan, and what their task ought to be the political parties that who could come up with a better implementation plan, right? And you mentioned the fact that you didn't read the national development plan from cover to cover. Oh well, I don't know if anybody has. I don't think I have, but I've read bits. I haven't read it from cover to cover, but I would say I've covered enough pieces that cover the entire plan, right? But there's a lot there to digest. It's 460 odd pages, right? And our plan was that we would engage in a public relations exercise where we would probably have a show, much like yours, where once a week for 1 hour we would focus on a portion of the National Development Plan, so that the people in the community could understand in detail exactly what they have in their plan and how we're going to go about implementing those things, right? So you don't have to read the 460 pages, but maybe over a 6 months period, we would have covered in detail half the plan, that people would have a better understanding of it.
Great. So folks, you're watching Something to Think About with D.H.L. Knowles, and we're here with Felix Stubbs. And we're talking about why the National Development Plan is important for the Bahamas at this time. And when we come back, we're going to dive into some of the specifics of not the plan itself, but in terms of, well, let's just come back and then you will see all of the great things that's come on the table, because, my brain always ticks. And when we were in COVID, it had plenty of time to tick. And so I put plenty of things on the table, and we're going to discuss some of those when we come back. The new built environment. We'll be right back.
For more than 3 decades, thousands have enjoyed the ultimate wedding experience at the Bahamas Bridal Show. On Sunday, April 16th, 40 of the finest wedding and home suppliers will gather at Grand Hyatt Bahamar, displaying everything needed for a perfect celebration. One lucky bride wins a dream wedding, and hundreds share $30,000 in prizes, $50 tickets, a template, or buttons formal wear. With all my love. The 33rd Annual Bahamas Bridal Show, 2 p.m., Sunday, April 16th.
Welcome back to Something to Think About with D.H.L. Happy Knowles. And we're here this evening speaking with the Honorable Felix Stubbs on why a national development plan is best for us at this time. So, Mr. Stubbs, Dr. Miles Monroe also said that when purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. You know, we always have this issue with people and some things being abused, and I guess his statement is very good, because I was taught that governments, particularly following the British system that we have, the Westminster system, that government is supposed to be the efficient and the crown is supposed to be the dignified. And so if we look at efficiency, I find that efficiency is one of the major issues that we have in our country that is hindering us from causing us not to live the life that we could be living in the Bahamas. And so let's steer the conversation as to how this national development plan is going to help us improve that, because we have all this talent being advertised all around, as you see in the papers and stuff, but a lot of them are leaving the country, and we're having this brain drain of sorts. And so when we look at that, we're going in the opposite direction somewhat from where we need to. How do we connect and get the talent to stay in the country using the National Development Plan?
That's a very interesting question. First of all, the plan called for good governance, right? Mm-hmm. And a part of good governance means you want to have transparent government. And oftentimes in the Bahamas, we don't have that. And so what happens is, you have young Bahamians who equip themselves to come back and help the country. And when they come back, they find that a lot of the opportunities are not available to them because they don't know the right person or they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And people aren't interested in supporting them, right? Additionally, we have Bahamians who may have been successful, but aren't prepared to bring the younger, more educated ones along because they're protecting their jobs, whatever the case might be. And so if we have a national plan, we would build a plan for those kinds of things. So what happens when young white Bahamians come back? How do we engage them and make sure we challenge them, right? A national development plan hopefully would also help us to expand the economy that will make opportunities more readily available, because part of the reason young kids don't stay is because the opportunities aren't there either. And that's because we have a very small environment. We're not growing the economy as fast as we need to. And so we're going to have a challenge trying to keep our young people home when economies like the United States and Canada and the UK are so attractive to them. I believe that a national development plan will help us to figure out what we need to do and give us the tools that we need to actually grow our economy. And what it will do is take the emotions out of it. Like I'd say, it'll be fact-based. And so people would know that when a government makes a decision, it isn't because it's somebody's gut feel or some political position that they're taking. It's a decision that's been taken based on data that's been driven by independent sources that are easily verifiable, that if we use that data properly, we're going to see the benefits that will benefit people at large as opposed to just a few.
Yeah. And some of those persons who I know who have gone off and gone on have said to me that, they're just totally frustrated and they can't see the end game. And I think the plan roadmap laid out like how we all have developed the National Development Plan will help people understand what and where we are going so they could see how they fit into the picture and how they could contribute to our society.
Well, not only does the plan do that, but the plan also specifically said, when it said to be inclusive, it said we ought to include the diaspora. right? So when we went about getting input from people, we didn't just go to the Bahamas, the New Providence, and the Family Islands in Grand Bahama.
Right.
We went abroad and we spoke to Bahamians abroad who we had access to, and we got their input as to what it was that we needed to do to make the Bahamas this attractive place again, and that would bring them back home. And so when we started laying out the tenets of the plan, those things were taken in consideration. And if we executed on the plan properly, we would attract some of those people back home. I'm pretty certain of that.
So, Ms. Iris Knowles here is asking this question, I guess is pertaining directly to that, because this you mentioned was 2012 and the years after, and we're now in 2023. And so she asks us if the plan was developed, why was the plan derailed?
Yeah, well, and that's not, just several answers to that. The first answer is that the plan was not developed. The plan is still being developed. The plan, when we left the plan in 2017, it was in its fourth phase, draft phase, right? So what happened is we would gather the data, figure out what the consensus of the country was, and put that into a document and put the action items against it. We then put a draft out and say, okay, guys, here's what you said. Read this and come back to me and tell me if that makes sense, right? And then we get some additional input. And so then we do a second draft. We did a third draft, and we did a fourth draft, right? The fourth draft that we put out, which was in 2017, was probably going to be the final draft. And then the next phase of that was going to be to complete the program. So the development plan is about 80% complete, right?
Okay.
Unfortunately, at that point in 2017, you know, we had an election and the government changed, and the new government at the time didn't think that the plan in its totality was something they wanted to pursue, but they did pick up bits and pieces of the plan and to try and execute that, right? Now, the challenge you have with that is when you start cherry picking a development plan, you no longer have a development plan, right? And so you're better off, even if you pick the best parts of the plan and try to implement it, you're not going to be better off than if you had a total development plan. And I'll give you an example. So let's say the development plan called for the infrastructure upgrades, paving of our streets, right? Well, paving the streets is not just a simple exercise like going out and pave the streets. You know, you have to plan between the Water and Sewage Corporation, the telephone company, the electricity company, all these things. It has to be a coordinated effort. That's what the national plan does, because, you know, our experience say when we pave a street, someone's going to come back and dig it up, right? And so, but if you have a national development plan, the plan would say, okay, in March 2023, I am going to pave Bay Street, right? That's for the Ministry of Works. But at BEC, they also know that the plan is to pave Bay Street, so they will have their act together. The telephone company will have their act together, and so when Bay Street gets paved, all of those utilities things that are needed are done. So the plan helps people to coordinate their efforts. And I would tell you, one of the biggest challenges we have in this country today is that every single ministry is almost like a silo. Right? You have these ministers on charge of each of the ministries. They have their objectives, and not often they get to crosstalk, right? And a national development plan would make that an easier thing to do.
That's great. That's great. Because, I mean, that speaks directly to efficiency. Because, I mean, if you can dig it up and dig it up and dig it up and dig it up, then that... And what it also does is it causes frustration to rise, and that causes productivity to drop, which means we get less revenue for our production.
Exactly. But also you listen to your citizens as well, because going back to the Bay Street being paved situation, the citizens may say, yeah, we want Bay Street paved, but that's not the number one priority. The number one priority is to pave Wolf Road, right? And here are the benefits. And so what you'll do in the National Development Plan, okay, we have to pave Bay Street, we have to pave Wolf Road. Which one will bring us the biggest bang for the buck? Which one will give us the best economic the relief or advantage? And so if it's paving Wolf Road will bring more economic benefit to the Bahamian people, maybe that's what you do because that's what you plan and all the data that you get a say. So the plan is very important, right? And don't forget, a lot of the people who help to put this plan together are very intelligent people. They don't just, sit down and have a vision list. They kind of do some research and figure out what's the best way to move forward.
Yeah, so we just got to act on it. And that's why I'd asked the question earlier about the political, some economic and social aspects, because in the plan we'll take into effect all of those. And so, just having one component being dominant and we doing things just to see how much money we could make to kill the debt, because the other things are tied into also the social impact and the political impact moving forward. Cool.
You're right.
So
you're right.
So when we look at that then and we say those things, the people who are leaving the country, who can still contribute and have it to green passes, does that mean now that we have to create the environment that is going to be conducive for them to want to stay here and all the other players and stakeholders that we have here? So does that call for us to go into like smart cities, or how do we?
So if we want to keep our people, and again, it's a matter of planning, right? So let's say, for instance, we decide that as part of the National Development Plan, we want to enhance the educational system to give Bahamians an opportunity to get an education that will cost them to compete on a global basis, right? So that's the plan. So you can't just go and train a bunch of Bahamians to be super people and compete globally, and if you don't at the same time plan opportunities at home for them to take advantage of, right? And so exactly, and so that's the reason why planning is so important. And so we know the reasons why Bahamians leave. Well, several reasons. But one of them also is the fact that there are the opportunities that they can get abroad, right? So we have to plan to make those opportunities available. What is it that the Bahamas could do to make it either unique or competitive in a global space, right? And work those industries, and then we train Bahamians to work those industries. And so when they become global citizens and global competitively, they can come back home and put the Bahamas on the map, because they would have the same skills as their counterparts in the United States and the UK and Canada and elsewhere, right? And so we don't have to have 300 million people to be competitive on the global stage, right? Last time I checked, I think Singapore had, I don't know what, 3 million maybe, if that. Yeah. And look where they are. And by the way, when we go back and do the studies, starting back in 1970 to 1970, and we could compare ourselves to Singapore, I mean, we were, if on a scale from 1 to 10, if we were 5, Singapore would have been 2 or 3. Right? They implemented a national development plan. Today they may be 10 and we may be 4. Right? They executed on their plan. Right? Now, I have to say that they had a kind of leadership and the governance style that made it easy for them. We would have to be, I think, a little bit less democratic. Right. If we wanted to kind of progress as quickly as they did.
Right. Yeah, well, that's a good way of putting it. But I don't know if the Bahamians understand or want to. I shouldn't say understand. Want to go at that rate. They might go at that rate, but they don't want to go to take the sacrifice that's needed to go at that rate.
Here's the problem.
That's what they did, right?
I disagree with that, because the reason.
What I mean, let me clarify before you go in. What I'm saying is that they became very autocratic in a lot of things that they did, and Bahamians tend not to want people to tell them what to do. They want to have their fingers on it.
And this is the reason why I'm saying I tend to disagree, right? I would say, sure, Bahamians don't want people to be autocratic, and we don't have to be autocratic. I think we can be a little bit less, I call less democratic. But the key though is transparency. If we tell people what's being done, why is it being done, how's it going to be done, the results to expect from it, right? And because it's transparent, they know that everybody can have an opportunity and not just a few, right? I would suspect that Bahamians would be cooperative, right? Because if I know that my government is making some changes that's going to impact my children and my grandchildren positively, I'll support that, right? But if I see them doing things I don't understand why they're doing it, I'm going to question it. And usually when things are being done and you don't understand why, you immediately think it's not good. You don't think it's bad. You don't think it's good. You think it's not good. And so that's why transparency and communications is so important.
Yeah, very much so. And that's what we're all about here, to try and get us to increase our efficiency and proficiency to get things done, which is mainly we have to do it through people. And so we have to connect with people, which is why I keep asking the question, how are we going to connect? How are we going to connect?
And that's why your show is so important, and I mean to interrupt you. That's why your show is so important, because you are giving Bahamians an opportunity to appreciate what it is we have, to give them the knowledge to question things, and to make sure they understand.
Well, I appreciate that word of confidence. Yes. So whilst we were on COVID, and my brain started to take too much because you all isolated me from everything, I came up with this view that we're going to have something called we needed to not follow this concept of the new normal, but follow what I call an intentional new built environment. Did I drop? Okay. Oh, okay, I'm back. So the new built environment that we would have would come up with in terms of what it does for our society, and that's why I said we're talking about the political, economic, and social environment, so that we could have sustainability along the way and increase the level of quality of life for the Bahamians. And in that, I broke it down into 5 pillars: sun, sand, sea, digital, and people. And sun from the various flavors of solar and sustainability. Sand is bush medicines and things that come from the land. How we could create light industries for those. And sea, we have the marine safari or shark safaris and stuff would come from the sea. Digital, meaning all this stuff being connected digital, because we're the most digitally connected country in this hemisphere. I'm convinced of that. Right. Per square mile for sure. And then people, but all means we have to leverage the people. So when we look at all of those things, and the National Development Plan seems to me to be a marriage made in heaven for something like that, in order to be able to materialize. So, and that should be able to help us to develop this $100 billion economy that I see coming out of those 5 pillars. So how do we then push for stuff like this on what other people might have to be integrated into the plan moving forward? Because you mentioned that it's 80% completed, but that means that there's still room for more, or is a living document?
Yeah, there's still a 20%. But and we have to remember also that the plan will always be a living document. No plan is static, right? So once you create your baseline, you set your plan, and as you achieve your goals, you review your plan to make sure you're still on track. And as you make progress, you modify your plan to accommodate changes in the environment or the political landscape or whatever the case might be, right? So the plan is always a living document. And like I say, there's 20% more for us to do in terms of setting the action items and the timelines and the responsibilities on what we have now. But beyond that, we also now have to update the plan because it's 6 years old. The good thing is that the Prime Minister has indicated that he's now ready to re-engage the private sector into helping with this development plan, right? And so we're announcing it on your show for the first time, so you got exclusive. I've been asked to once again share the National Development Plan, and I'm in the process now of beginning to put together the steering committee. And again, my only caveat to the Prime Minister is that it can be political. So I'll pick my team, and he tell me whatever team I pick, give it to him. He'll pass it through cabinet. And then after we get a steering committee chosen, the government then has to appoint a steering committee. And these would be public servants, the ones who would actually get on the ground and do the work, right? So all the research stuff and that kind of stuff that needs to be done, the printing of publications, arranging public relations and interviews, and those kinds of things. And then the other key for me is to re-engage Dr. Nicola Roll, because I think she is just, like I said, a treasure for the talent. She should be the one who heads an agency that is the planning agency for the Bahamas. She's that good. And having said that, we didn't just do this planning document. There are two other documents that go along with this. One is the National Planning Institute, and that would be a statutory body, right? That would do all the planning for government, but do all the research on all the things, so that, you know, what amazes me often is we take things to cabinet, right? And you got cabinet ministers sitting around the table, and they debate as to whether it's good or not. But they based on, you know, what they may have heard, what their personal feelings are, what they're feeling. There's no data to substantiate what they're talking about.
Right.
What should happen is when they get to cabinet, the planning institution will put all the information on the table. Here is the pros, here are the cons. Guys, look at it, make a decision. So you're making decisions based on empirical data. Right, as opposed to gut decisions, right? So that's the reason for the Planning Institute. And then the other thing that we did was we created a national development plan bill that would be enacted in Parliament, that would make the national development plan a statutory document, meaning that parliamentarians can't just change it from the government and dismiss it, right? It's become something that it's just like, you know, every year they got to do a budget. Every year they have to, you know, get a updated national development plan and abide by it. And by the way, when we went even further in saying we wanted to engage University of the Bahamas, who on an annual basis will look at how well a government did against the national development plan and publicly grade the ministers on their performance. Right? Now that will bring transparency. That will bring accountability, right? So you get an independent body saying, here's how these guys are doing, rather than the public guessing or become some political fodder that says, I don't like this minister, so let's try and blackball him. You can actually measure these guys against SMART goals and how well they do on an annual basis. And then when you do that, the country will move forward a lot faster.
Right, because you just answered the question I was going to ask next, which would have been in terms of that, how do you ingrain it so that it doesn't go through another scenario where things get dropped behind? Because the execution is key, particularly execution of the people who design it. Because my experience in telecoms is people, or even in engineering, I find that when other people try to grab your plan and implement it, they might know some of the plan, or they might know the plan was on paper or documented in the public space, but they don't know all the intricacies behind it. And so when they go to implement it, they don't have a clear vision as to what is the ultimate goal, as to what you as a designer was thinking, to be able to implement it properly. And so then it has hiccups and flat tires and whatever.
And that is the reason why a lot of the plans to date have not gone anywhere, because, you know, we've gone and we've had foreign consultants do them. They come in and write a nice document, they dump it on somebody's desk and they go away, and there's no one to implement it, right? Here, what you get is not only do you get the people who are designing the plan, they get to be part of the implementation of it, and then you have someone who's independent get to evaluate how well they're doing.
Awesome. So we only got a couple minutes left, but so I could fast track to some of these other billion questions that I would have for you on this topic, because you capsulize a lot of them in that summary that you did, and welcomed initiatives that are being put in place to strategize things. But what advice then would you give to the Bahamian people and those who are on the fence as to how they would can either get more information or can learn or become better at understanding why National Development Plan is important at that time?
Yeah, so we're going to go and complete the National Development Plan. That I can promise, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can also promise that there's going to be a lot of education where people will be able to get an opportunity to sit down and listen to programs like yours, or whether it's on television or wherever the case may be, and get to understand the plan in detail. And so once they understand the plan, then they could determine whether they support it or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, once they understand the plan, if there's something in the plan that they don't agree with, or they have better ideas, the plan, because it's a living document, can still accept those ideas and be modified, because no plan is ever going to be perfect, right? And once you lay the plan out there are going to be some better ideas coming in. And so the framers of the plan got to be prepared to continually modify the thing to get the best results.
Awesome. And Mr. Stubbs, Felix, we really had something to think about. Appreciate you taking the time and sacrifice to share with us today, because I know you have had a busy schedule, and just getting a hold of you to sit down for 5 minutes to have this conversation is an accomplishment in itself. And so, but I know from my experience with you and your leadership and the teams that I saw on the list, and those who will probably be put together again, that this will grow to new heights, and the Bahamas will be happy for it. We might be uncomfortable with certain things, like when we reverse the roads, going to Paradise Island, or digging up the roads. But once it's finished, then we see the benefits of it clearly, and I'm sure nobody wants to go backwards. So I really, really, really will thank you for all of your service, not just with this plan, because you are a monument in this society, a big icon.
Well, thank you for those kind words, and thank you for this opportunity. I just want to put a pitch in, though, that as we begin to build a team for the National Development Plan, the steering committee may be, 20 people, right? But that's not all the resources we want to use, because every single organization ought to be represented in some way, right? And so those 15 people may represent 15 subcommittees, and those subcommittees can have subcommittees. So you can have, hundreds of people giving input into this plan. So it doesn't matter where you sit on the totem pole, your input is important. And so if you think you have something to offer to the National Development Plan planning process, give me a call, and we'll find somebody to fit you in.
Yes, and even if the person isn't on the committees, if you are not on the committees or whatever, then there you have access to all those persons that you mentioned, and get your thoughts and ideas into the system, because that's how we're going to grow as a unified country.
And you don't even have to come to us; we'll come to you, because we've gone through. We've been through Dog Flea Alley interviewing people. So we will go anywhere as long as we think we can get information that's going to be put into the plan.
Well, that's awesome. Touching the people as we go.
That's right.
And thank you kindly again. Folks, you've been watching Something to Think About with D.H.L. Happy Knowles, and we're here. Glad that you stayed with us. I hope you got some nuggets out of this and value, and we look forward to having further conversations as this new kickoff progress. Maybe Mr. Stubbs will bring you back at a later date, somebody to give us an update as to what's going on, how we're going. We're in our 50th year of anniversary as a country, and I don't think there's anything better than to put something like this in place for that here, to commemorate that, and we should be moving from strength to strength. $100 billion economy. How does that sound?
I think it's doable.
Yes, very much so. And I look forward for your support and we making it happen.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all, folks, Madam Producer. Good evening.
Good evening.
Enjoyed the show? Then subscribe to us for more educational and inspirational content. Ring the bell so you never miss a show. Let's change the narrative 242.